All right. Well, Josh just stole all my introduction. So welcome in, Church in the Parquet. Next week, we're back in person in the building, both 9 and 10:30. We'd love to see you there. And then Thursday night services are kicking off soon on September 14th, if you haven't heard that. I'm just buying space in my own head to get started. So today, what we're really diving into is we're finishing up. We have 2 more weeks left in our GOAT series, the greatest of all time, where we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, where Jesus gave us some of the most important teaching that he gave at one time in one place. And inside of that, we've unpacked a lot of stuff. And over the next 2 weeks, we're going to take on Matthew 7 almost in its entirety. But this morning is all about 6 verses. We're going to be Matthew 7, 1 through 6. And I think it's important just to stop with that because I genuinely think this is one of the most misapplied section of Scripture when it comes to Jesus' teaching. I think we might understand it, but I think we misapply it. And I think if you misapply it, you miss the whole point, and you actually cascade a domino effect that ruins the people around you and actually gets in the way sometimes of our own health. All right, so we're going to start with Matthew 7, 1 and 2, because that's where we stop. All right, we tend to stop after 2 verses in this thing, and we tend to make our opinion based on that alone. So we're just going to attack that head on here, right? So Matthew 7, 1 and 2 says this, and as I start, you're all going to be like, oh, it's that one, okay? It says, do not judge others, or you too will be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And most of us stop there. And we're like, got it, good. Don't judge me, I won't judge you. Right? We sit there and we're like, okay, like I understand now that I'm not to judge you, which means you're not to judge me, which means let's just all go about our merry way. We stop at the end of verse 2 and we actually miss the point. And if you play that out, our whole world starts to unravel. Right? Our whole world starts to fall apart. If it's you don't judge me, I won't judge you, every teacher here cannot give a grade again. And all the middle schoolers and high schoolers are now big fans of mine. I mean, you play it out, right? Don't judge me, I won't judge you. Hey, teacher, I know you said 2 plus 2 is 4, but like in my soul, it's 5. So I'm not going to judge you, you don't judge me, we're good, right? It starts to fall apart. I mean, no police officer would ever be able to give a speeding ticket again. Hey, I know you said it was a 35, but in my heart, it's a 75, so I'm not going to judge you, so just don't judge me. Right? It starts to fall apart. Those are ridiculous examples, but like if you follow it forward, your spouse would never be able to get on you again about leaving socks all throughout the house. Okay, that's just me. Okay. Well, this is a very public apology to my wife, because here's what happens every day when I get home. I take off my shoes, and I go in socks for about 30 minutes, and then those get annoying to me, so then I tear them off and just leave them in the basement. But think about it. If it's don't judge me, I won't judge you, suddenly our spouses won't even be able to tell us something that we need help with or that we need to disagree with or we need to work on. If we just stop at don't judge or you too will be judged, chaos follows. Right? And what happens is we actually end up in a place of spiritual arrogance. And this is the greatest risk that comes from this. You can't tell me what's right or wrong because I'm not telling you what's right or wrong, so just let me do what I want to do. Spiritual arrogance is the natural maturation. It's the natural growth of don't judge me and I won't judge you. And spiritual arrogance is something that destroys relationships. It pushes back against the kingdom and actually slows people down from interacting with Jesus. And here's what I mean. If you play that out, if it's don't judge me, suddenly we become very bad knockoffs of a very bad MC Hammer. Right? We sit back and suddenly it's stop, don't judge that. Right? Suddenly it's like, oh man, like I see you're having a problem with your money. Can I offer you advice? Stop. Don't judge that. No. Right? I mean, like, we become bad MC Hammers. You know, oh, I see your kids are struggling in school. Like, can I offer you some advice? Like, no, stop. Don't judge that. Oh, I see your marriage. Like, you guys are fighting a lot. Like, can I help you with something I've been through? No, stop. Don't judge that. I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind when he said, do not judge or you too will be judged. But it's where we took it. Because we're sinful beings that have fallen. And because of that, we actually sit here, and we sit here spiritually arrogant. And unfortunately, in North America, the church is known way more for talking than it is for listening. It's known way more for speaking judgment and opinions than it is for listening to judgment and opinions. As a matter of fact, between 25 and 35-year-old right now, that generation, that decade, is leaving the church in droves. And 66% of them will point back to the fact of spiritual arrogance being the thing that turned them away from the church. A survey was done, and the top 3 answers all reflected spiritual arrogance. They said, why are you leaving the church? And those 25 through 35-year-olds answered this, that Christians are ready to defend more than they are to engage in conversations. The Christians are ready to stand up and say, no, you're wrong, and not be able to hear that we're wrong. They answered that Christians of the church was full of hypocrites, that we said one thing and then lived another and didn't want to hear about it. The third top reason they gave is actually that Christians just weren't willing to hear that they were wrong and that they caused pain, that they hurt other people. See, when we fall into this trap of stop, don't judge that, we actually end up putting ourselves into the place of God. We actually end up putting ourselves into the place of where we think we are the final judge on everything. But we know that 2 Timothy 3:16 says, for all Scripture is God-breathed and profitable. Profitable for what? For teaching, rebuking, and building up of the saints. So we know that there are things that we need to hear from people that might be able to offer us advice. There's going to be judgments, even criticisms, coaching, construction that we need to go through. But we do it wrong, and we do it unhealthily. But I think what Jesus says in actually 1 through 6, if we actually unpack the next 4 verses, we actually find out a way to bring health into our help and a way for us to receive help in a healthy way. Because it's not about not judging. It's actually, you'll see, it's all about relationship. So we're going to dive in. And we're going to read, I want to read the whole thing at once, and we'll break it down. I think there are 3 ways in this 6-verse section that we can actually find the ability to give help with health and to receive help in a healthy way. All right, so the whole section, Matthew 7, 1 through 6, says this. Do not judge others, for you too will be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. Good. Everybody got? Okay, good. Check. We got that one. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Don't waste what is holy on unholy people. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They will be trampled. They will trample the pearls and then turn and attack you. See, there's a lot more there than just don't judge or you too will be judged. But I also know that when we're talking, we're going to have a whole conversation here about judging and about the pain that comes from people judging us. I know that's real. I know that's heavy when people hear that. So I actually want to start in prayer before we go after those 3 choices that we can start to make. So would you guys join me in prayer real quick? Lord, we're real people with real pains. God, and we all come in with something. We all come in with a judgment, with a criticism, with an attack that's been given to us before that we've hung on to for too long. So God, I pray right now against that pain slowing us down. I pray right now against those scars hurting us again. And I pray that from the middle of this section of your sermon, we can actually find ways to bring health into help. Protect us right now. Protect our souls enough so we can hear. And protect our future enough where we can apply this. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so the first thing we see, we're just going to hang out again in verse 1 and 2. The first thing we see is that when we're actually trying to bring health into help, we have to find a way to choose consistency over criticism. When it comes to judging and building people up and giving advice, we have to choose consistency over criticism. Right? Again, it says, do not judge or you too will be judged, for you'll be treated the same way you treat others. Consistency is right there in the middle. You'll be treated the same way that you treat others. It's consistency, not criticism. Right? And this starts from the very beginning. I want you to picture a time when you got coached up, you got criticized, you got attacked. It could be a boss, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling, an aunt and uncle. Somebody told you at some point you were missing the mark. Right? And in that moment, how did it feel? Bad. Okay, we can't pass the mic around. Bad. Right? It feels bad to feel judged. It feels bad to be critiqued. It feels bad to be attacked. Right? And when that happens, in that moment, you know what happens every single time? Every single time we feel unfairly judged, we get defensive. Every single time we feel unfairly judged, we lean back, we cross our arms, and we start to come up with the counter argument. Right? We sit back because it's criticism. It puts us on our heels. We don't love it. It puts us back. But the same thing is true that if we do consistency over criticism, think back to a coach or a mentor or a parent that had your corner the whole time. They had your back. And think of the fact that they could probably tell you the same thing that boss told you and you're not offended by it. Right? A boss could tell you, hey, you keep showing up late, you're going to be fired if you do it again. And you're like, now hold on, I had a flat tire, there was this whole fare thing, I got lost, right? I mean, we start coming up with all these excuses and all of these GPS, that's the lost thing. We come up with all these arguments as to why it shouldn't be us. But imagine instead when a coach or a mentor says, hey, you got to start showing up on time or else you're going to be in trouble. Well, then we don't lean back, then we actually lean in. Right? When somebody that is consistently for us gives us consistent advice, we don't get defensive. We actually lean in and we say, okay, tell me more. Tell me what you mean. Right? And while we see that in our own lives, at the same time, we don't want to give that to other people. We're not interested in consistency because consistency takes time. You know what's fast and you know what's fun? We can all be honest here, or at least for me. Criticism is fun. Right? It's enjoyable to be like, that's where they're doing it wrong. That's where I'm better. Let's go. Right? Like there's some fun in being able to say really quick what you disagree with. You know what takes health and takes time? Consistency. Right? As a matter of fact, I would say this, that the very thing that you're hardest on other people about shows you the thing that you're most insecure about. If you find yourself constantly lobbing criticism on social media or in your heart or in your language or in your conversation, if you're launching criticism often about somebody's family, you know what you're probably most worried about? Somebody judging your family. If you're launching it often about their clothes or their appearance or the way they're moving about through life, you know what you're worried about? How people are perceiving you. Right? The things that we criticize about are usually the things that we are most fearful about being criticized of. But consistency is the antidote to all of that. That's why Jesus said that you'll be treated the way you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. Consistency. So let me end this first idea by asking you a question. If the people around you said the same things you say about them, how would that feel? If while you were judging somebody's marriage over here, somebody over there was judging your marriage the same way, how would that hit you? How would that feel? And if that's making you kind of squirm for a second, then I would challenge that most likely you're acting out of criticism and not consistency. You're acting out of a need to disagree or to be better than or to put yourself on top, while in reality, you need to be alongside. Consistency over criticism lets us bring health into help. Next, we see the second thing. We see that we need to learn how to choose honesty over hypocrisy. We need to learn how to choose honesty over hypocrisy, right? Look at this in Matthew 7, 3-5. It says, "And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a big log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, 'Let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye,' when you can't see past the log in your own, you hypocrite? First, get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye." I love when Jesus uses ridiculous language to make a point. Right? Like we physically get this. And I love how he does it, right? Because even if you're not there on the Jesus thing, if you're not sure about faith, if you're not sure about relationship, if you're just here on accident, welcome. That's an interesting story, how you just showed up. But if you're sitting there, and if you're not sure about where you're at with Jesus, then this story, at least like everybody can be like, yeah, that's not right. Right? Picture you're doing a lawn project or a wood project in your backyard. And you're sawing away, you're building whatever you're building, right? And suddenly some sawdust, some specks gets caught up in the wind and lands in your neighbor's eye. Is it bad? Yes. But in that same moment, if the saw kicked up and launched a 2x4 into your chest, is that worse? Yes. Right? I love this, right? Like I have no EMT training, but I feel very confident that if an EMT showed up on that moment, they would say, yeah, I see the speck, but dude, you're the bigger problem here. Right? And we can visually picture that, right? Like, oh man, like you don't want your surgeon walking up with a 2x4 hanging out of their chest saying, let me get that out of your eye, right? Like we get the absurdity of this picture when it comes to what Jesus is saying, and we get the absurdity of it when it's physical, and somehow we miss the point when it's about our lives. We totally miss the point that yes, there is a speck of brokenness in your friend's eye, but there's a log of brokenness in your own life. Right? I'll put it this way, that on our way to criticizing, and on our way to judging, on our way to accusing others, we always excuse ourselves. on our way to accuse others, we will make every excuse about why we're not in the same boat. On our way to help them with their speck of sawdust, we will ignore the 2x4 hanging out of our eye. Right? And if you don't believe this, I believe it's so ingrained in us that it's actually hard to believe this at first. Because I sat back. I've been sitting on this idea for like a week and a half, trying to wrestle through and be like, okay, God, like when is a story? When's a time? When can I make people laugh? Can I make them cry at how dumb I am? Like, how can I like get this across? And I sat there and I'm like, you know what? Let's just think of times I've judged people. Let's pick of time where I was a hypocrite over honesty. You know what happened? I sat back and I was like, okay, I did judge that person for their job performance, but it was bad. I did judge that person that time on their family life, but you know what? I was right. You know, I did sit back that time and disagree with a decision they made, but you know who was right? Me. I sat there, and even sitting in my office, even driving in the car in a completely safe space, just me and God, I still could not come to terms with the fact that I probably had a plank in my own eye while I worked on that speck in theirs. I didn't want to own it. I didn't want to admit it, and it's so deep in our psyche, this defending mechanism, this hypocrite nature of what we have, makes it almost impossible for us to say, I'm going to leave that speck alone so that I can work on the log in my own life. Because on the way to accusing them of their brokenness, we will ignore everything we did wrong along the way. Now, ultimately, God actually, wouldn't leave me alone on this one, so I came up with it. I actually have this tendency that when I see people making a life decision that I think is wrong, I get real upset real quick, like an outsized response to like, how could they do that? I'm going to go save them, right? And if you like me, you could probably believe it's care and compassion. If you're not a fan of mine, you can believe it's cynicism, and you're all right? Like, I'll race forward, and I'll be like, let me tell you why that life decision is a bad idea. And on the way, I am tripping over my own bad life decisions, my own struggles, so that I can tell them what's wrong with their one idea. Right? And I think later, after Jesus, Paul wrote this letter to the church in Rome. It's Romans 2. We actually see him address this very same thing, this time when we accuse others and excuse ourselves. Paul put it this way. He said, you may think that you can condemn such people outside the church, people outside of Jesus, but you are just as bad, and you have no excuse. When you say they are wicked and should be punished, you are condemning yourself, for you judge those that do the very same things you do. And we know that God, in his justice, will punish anyone that does such things. Since you judge others for doing these things, why do you think you can avoid God's judgment when you do the same thing? Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? Can't you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from your sin? Right? Paul says, listen, church, listen, Christ followers, listen, believers, right? You see specks and you want to argue over them. You see specks of struggle and you want to dive in and be the Messiah, but Paul is saying you're not the Messiah. The very same things that you're getting upset about are the very same things that you've already done to God. See, God is completely aware of every mistake you've made and every speck and sawdust and 2x4 in your head. He is completely aware of all of it. And yet, he sits back and he is loving, patiently tolerant, and kind with you, all so that you might know him more. And when we turn around and we're a hypocrite instead of honest, we actually do the opposite work. When we are not patient and kind, when we use God's grace as a consumer and not as a giver, we actually push back against the kingdom. And we bring hurt and pain to people that could use the help and could use the health. When we excuse our mistakes to accuse others of theirs, there's something big at risk. It's our trustworthiness. It's our credibility. And if you have a tendency to excuse your struggle and accuse others of theirs, here's the secret. They're aware of your 2x4. They're not caught off guard by it. Right? When you come walking up trying to perform surgery with a piece of lumber hanging out of your chest, like they're not like, oh, I didn't see it there. No, like they're painfully aware of the fact that you're coming in with your own struggles and burdens, which means when you ignore them and you're a hypocrite about them, they're also painfully aware that you're trying to ignore the 2x4 hanging out of your eye. They know. Why not let God use that 2x4 for his good instead of your insecurity? Why not let God use your struggle to help somebody else out of theirs instead of trying to look put together all the time? So again, we started with this idea that we need to choose consistency over criticism, and then we saw that we need to choose honesty over hypocrisy, and the third thing that we see here is we need to choose relationship over relentless. We need to choose relationship over relentlessness, right? Matthew 7:6 says, "Don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They'll trample the pearls, then turn and attack you." And all the people in the back said, "What?" Like, hold on. Okay, so I get the idea, don't judge, you'll be judged. I get the lumber thing. Like, I've seen lumber liquidators commercials. Like, that's fine. But why are we now talking about agriculture? Like, what does this mean? Don't throw pearls to pigs. What does it mean to not waste what is holy on people that are unholy? Like, I was with you until now. And when we have questions about this stuff, like, we can do a couple things. We can ask mentors, we can ask pastors, we can ask small group leaders, we can ask Google. Back in the mid-2000s, we could ask Jeeves, right? Like, we can do these things to try to find our answer, but always, the Bible is the only book that talks back to you. And the Bible will show what the Bible means, right? So back in the early days of the Old Testament in Leviticus, the Jewish people were commanded to avoid pigs as unclean animals. And for the rest of the Bible, we see this allusion back to that fact that pigs can just be unclean animals. And we also see a similar thing when it comes to dogs. Like, dogs return to their own vomit, so a fool commits the same mistake again. When Jesus cast out legion, the demons, the legion from the man, he cast them into pigs, and they went and drowned themselves, right? So we see this reoccurring animal thing. But when it comes to this, do not cast your pearls to pigs, I think it's actually really simple, right? What do pigs not care about? Anything, right? They want food and they want mud, and that's about the end of my understanding of pigs. But that's what they're after, right? So when you set something important, something vital, something holy in front of them, they're not going to care. So back in that day, jewelry had such high value, and today it has high value, and pearls in particular. So my family and I were really big into going to Disney World. We've been 3 times as a family, and our first time, my daughter was 2. And you can go to Epcot in the Japan Pavilion. You can actually pick out a pearl. So like you pick an oyster. It's super random, I'm sure. And they pull it out and crack it open, and there's your oyster. And they clean it, and they can put it into a jewelry setting, and it becomes yours, right? And you can pick a necklace, an anklet, a bracelet, a ring. You can buy 5 more pearls, which they actually push that a lot now that I think about it. And they want you to do this, right? So we were down there. My first trip with my family was like when my daughter was just shy of 2, and we did this. We opened the oyster. We saw the pearl. We put it in a necklace. I said no thank you to the other pearls, and then it became my wife's necklace for a bit. My daughter was too young to have it. Right now it's my daughter's necklace. It sits in her room, this pearl that we picked out, and it's valuable to us. It has meaning to us. But if I were to try to impress and woo a pig, I would not start with the pearl necklace. Right? I think this is wonderfully appropriate given the fact that the fair is happening right now, and somewhere in Walworth County there's a beautiful pig. I'm sure of it. That some 7-year-old girl has risen from her bed up until this big hoss moment, right? And it's at the fair, and it's Blue Ribbon winning, and it's Babe, the 2023 version, right? Like, I'm convinced that pig exists. And I'm convinced that the last thing I'm going to do is show up with my Epcot pearl to give it to that pig. You know why? It just doesn't care. Right? It's not there. It's not interested in it. So what Jesus is saying here by don't waste what is holy on unholy people, don't throw your pearls to pigs, he's saying that there are going to be times where people do not care about your opinion. There are going to be times where people do not care about your coaching. There's going to be times where people do not care to hear from you. And when you throw out that pearl, when you throw out that holy thing, when you throw out that advice, you know what's going to happen? They're going to take it, turn on you, and attack. See, I'm 35. I grew up in this internet age, right? So I've debated everything on the internet. I saw Alta Vista. I saw Ask Jeeves. I did MSN chat rooms. I saw Reddit. I saw Facebook. I saw Twitter. I saw MySpace. And things were better when we had MySpace. They were a lot better back then just with MySpace, right? But I saw all of this come to pass, and I've debated on the internet with probably thousands of strangers about God, religion, politics, fantasy football, barbecue, building decks. I've spouted off on things I have no right to talk about. And they've spouted back at me. You know how many people on the internet have changed my mind about anything? Nobody. Nobody. They're wasting their pearls on me because I don't know them, I don't trust them. You know what every change in my life has had in common? Someone I trust giving it to me. Again, we have to choose relationship over relentless, right? The goal is to come alongside someone until they need you. It's not to talk loudest, most often, and most verbally, most attackingly. Like we get this wrong. Your words don't matter until the person matters to you. Or perhaps most importantly, your words don't matter until they know they matter to you. Right? And we get this wrong. We choose relentlessness. And you know why? Because relentlessness is easy. We can say our thing, we can post our post, and we can shut our phone and go back to our normal life. You know what's hard? Relationship. We need to choose relationships over relentless. See, Jesus didn't say, don't judge or you too will be judged. He didn't leave it there. Instead, he painted this picture that health and help come from time and connection. That receiving health or help well starts from knowing the people that are giving it. And giving help well starts with the people, knowing them, caring about them, being time with them, right? We don't trust people that we don't know. And people we don't know do not lead to life change. So again, in a little over 140 words, we see that Jesus tells us we need to be consistently honest in our relationships. Consistently honest in our relationships. He shows us that we should not be critical hypocrites that are relentless. So let me ask you. You came into the park probably leaning to one of those two camps right now. Relationally honest and consistent, or critical hypocrite that's relentless with their opinion. And we both have both camps dancing inside of us. Right? I'll tell you all day long why you're wrong about college football. It's not good. NFL's better. And in that moment, I may be a critical hypocrite who's relentless. But the danger comes is when we become critically hypocritical and relentless with things that actually matter. We cause pain. We cause harm. We mean to bring health, and instead we bring disease. And you know this because people have done this to you on accident. They've judged you, they've criticized, they've attacked, and you still carry those scars. Even if it's just over socks in the basement. You carry them. But imagine a world. Imagine a world where we leave our criticism and our hypocrisy and our relentlessness behind us. And instead, the church, you, are known as being consistently honest in your relationships. You know what happens? You know what that looks like? It means you start to invest in the person before investing in your message. You invest in the person before your message. You take the posture of a servant before you take the stance of a teacher. You know how to change the next generation we just prayed for? Listen, like teenagers and below, they are done with the sage on the stage. They are way more interested in guides on the side. So if you want to invest in the future of the kingdom, become a guide on the side of a teenager or a child. Right? You take the stance, a posture of a servant before you take the stance of a teacher. You believe in patience over believing in efficiency. It may take you longer to get your message out. You may never get your full message out, but you know what happens? You get the important part out and they actually hear it. And most importantly, when we become consistently honest in our relationships, we start to believe that God has a bigger picture than just us. When we believe that we have to say everything that comes to our mind, we believe that we are the only person that can help that person see God. We believe that we are the only chance they have to see and understand God. But when we start to become consistently honest and move slow through relationship, you know what you're saying? God, I have my part, but I trust that you're telling a story. Yes, I have my page, and I will be there to help them with that, but I'm not writing the whole chapter. I'm not the main character of this chapter. When we launch attacks and judgments, we're playing the main character. But when we can play our part, we're actually trusting that God has something else in store for them. And that works both ways. We need to come to the vision and understanding and believing that God has people in our lives to bring help, the same way that he has us in their lives to bring help. And we get it way too wrong when we end up saying, stop, don't judge that. Would you guys pray with me? God, this is one of those things that sit inside of the Bible, and they're honestly easy to hear, easy to understand, but man, is it radical to bring it into our lives. It means we're taking a back seat. It means we're swallowing our words, swallowing our opinions. We're waiting for you to give us the chance to bring life change instead of taking opportunities to be talkative. God, I pray right now that when we came in with this pain and this sorrow from being judged, Lord, I pray right now in your spirit, in your name, you would heal that pain. That it would not slow us down, that the judgment and the words and the criticism of people before would not slow us down from being someone who is consistently relational and honest. God, the sins and the scars of the past don't slow the kingdom down. So right now we pray that you would forgive us where we've done that. We would receive healing from where it's been done to us so that we can move forward and change lives from being healthy and helpful. Lord, help us to choose consistency over criticism. Help us to choose honesty over hypocrisy. And help us to be